hit like, and subscribe. You're watching the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel.
Peace, family. This is your brother, Marc Lamont Hill. Welcome to a special edition of Night School. Every week here on the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel, we hold Night School a few days a week at least, every Monday and Wednesday guaranteed, where we break down the most controversial subjects, the most engaging debates, the most interesting subjects going on in the world today. And today is no different. But I wanted to talk about a very, very specific issue. We were going to do it on Wednesday night, but it was the night before Thanksgiving, and we had special guests. Well, you should check that episode out. And we had extra topics. And so I said, let's hold it and have a separate conversation about this topic. And this one is specifically dealing with Peter Beinart and this bigger question around boycotts. This bigger question about free speech, this bigger question about solidarity. In fact, anyway, there's a lot of directions we can go in, but I'm not going to be here for a long time. But I wanted to cover these issues. I'm giving people a second to get into the room as well. If it feels like I'm stalling or delaying, it's just I'm trying to give people a minute to get into the room, because this is a conversation that I want us to have and that I want us to have together, because this is fascinating. I want to give you all a quick update, give you all a quick explainer maybe about what happened with Peter Beinart. For those who don't know, Peter Beinart is a very well respected pro-Palestinian Jewish activist, writer, thinker, and professor. Peter Beinart is somebody who I've for years have watched in various outlets. I've watched on various platforms talk about Palestine, talk about the plight of Palestine. I have appeared in many platforms with Peter talking about these issues. He's written lots of books that you should read. The most recent one is called Being Jewish After the Destruction of Gaza, A Reckoning, which is a great book. The Crisis of Zionism is another great book of his that, you know, people have used to wrestle with ideas, to think through, to talk about, etc. And yes, y'all, we live. Karen, we live. Dallas Finals, Jazz LP's in the building. Appreciate you. Thank you for being here. We're gonna get to all of this stuff. So Peter is a well-respected voice. Peter's somebody who has come out and called out Netanyahu, called out the Israeli government, but more importantly, called out the project itself. He's someone who has stood in great solidarity with Palestinian people. He's someone who has acknowledged the legitimacy of BDS, someone who's acknowledged the legitimacy of the boycott, divestment, sanction movement. He's somebody who has been a kind of, when you talk about solidarity from Jewish people and anti-Zionist Jewish communities being vocal, Peter's been one of those people who's been a prominent voice. I just want to give some context for why this issue is happening the way it has. Peter's also a professor at CUNY University. He's long criticized again, not just Israeli policy and not just the actions of a particular Israeli leader, but he's called into question the project itself. He's called into question and publicly and vocally talked about Israel as an apartheid state. So that's what happened. So let me fast forward a little bit, because despite that, Peter did something that many of us were shocked by and many of us were disappointed by. I'm among the people who were both shocked and disappointed by his behavior. I'm going to bring up the tweet to give you the context in which I saw, in which many of us saw Peter's tweet announcing that he was going to be speaking at Tel Aviv University. And let me add one more thing. because I don't want to seem. I want to be transparent. I consider Peter a friend. Peter is an ally for sure of mine. He was a colleague of mine at CNN, and when I was fired from CNN for speaking out for Palestinian rights, uh, Peter was one of the few people that made any effort to help me. Uh, really, it was Peter Beinart, Angela Rye. Um, I mean, that was kind of it, it weren't a lot of people who were willing to speak up. There weren't a lot of people who were willing to risk their own lives. Kamal Bell was the other person. Kamal Bell was the other person who spoke up. So Peter has stood it up when it mattered. He's a colleague at CUNY. He's somebody who's written letters for me. He's someone who's advocated for me in front of the scenes and behind the scenes. He's provided opportunities for me. He's someone who I've talked to, interviewed, been interviewed by. He's someone whose mind I respect a great deal. I'm saying all this to say, like, I felt like and feel like I have a good sense, and he's been on night school. Thank you, Bullet. He's been here on night school and maybe even office hours as well. Uh, Peter is somebody who I have a relationship with. He's somebody who I've considered a friend and a colleague, and do consider a friend and a colleague. So that's the context. So when I saw this, I was profoundly shocked. Let me show you what it says. This is Peter on November 25th. November 25th. He tweeted, he said, "Tonight, I'm going to speak at Tel Aviv University. I know many people who I respect will think that this was the wrong decision, given that Israel, as widely recognized by experts on international law, practices not only apartheid, but genocide. I support full equality for Israel's Palestinian citizens, an end to the occupation, and the right of Palestinian refugees to return. I support many forms of boycott, divestment, and sanction against Israel and Israeli institutions." I need to put my glasses on, y'all. "I have repeatedly advocated implementing the Leahy Law, which would radically restrict, if not end, U.S. arms sales to Israel. I support the European Union ending its free trade agreement with Israel. I support ending Israeli participation in sports and cultural arenas like FIFA and Eurovision. I support these things because I don't believe that Israel will end its oppression of the Palestinian people and move towards equality under the law and historical justice without outside pressure. But I believe there's value in speaking to Israelis about Israel's crimes. I spent much of my adult life speaking to Jews about Israel's treatment of Palestinians. In that effort, I have conducted public discussion with many people whose views I consider immoral and spoken at many institutions that are based on principles with which I profoundly disagree. These include institutions like Tel Aviv University that are in various ways complicit in Israeli oppression. I do so because I want to reach Jews who disagree with me, because I believe that trying to convince Jews to rethink their support for Israel's oppression of Palestinians, I can contribute in some very small way to the struggle for freedom and justice." I don't have many opportunities to speak to Israelis, as it is the right-wing Israeli organizations have pressured Tel Aviv University to cancel my talk. I felt I should take advantage of this opportunity to say in Israel what I've been saying elsewhere for the last 2 years. I know many people I admire will disagree with this logic, but it stems from my desire to challenge Jewish supremacy and see the end of Israel's oppression of the Palestinian people. Huh. I eh, I was shocked. And Bullet the Bunny said, "I want Mark Lamont Hill's opinion on this." I agree with him wholeheartedly. I assume the him that Bullet agrees with is Peter Beinart. Um, I don't agree with Peter Beinart by any stretch. I love Peter, but I think and I still have great respect for his efforts over the years, and I think he's sincere, but I think he's dead wrong. And I think that this was a dangerous and irresponsible, deeply harmful choice that Peter's made. And I'm only addressing this in public because Peter made a public declaration. He made a public action. He gave a public speech. And the only way to deal with this is publicly. It's the principled and right thing to do to deal with this publicly. Also, one of the dangers, which I'll come back to, of Peter doing this is that it'll make other people think that this is okay. And so it's important for other people to know that it's not, despite the fact that I love Peter. And I'll hopefully get a chance to speak to him offline about this as well, where I'll say more. But I need to be very clear that this, to me, was a wrong choice and ultimately an unprincipled one. Oh, let me not say unprincipled. I'm not questioning his character. I'm questioning the choice. I think that this was a choice that betrays the principles that we stand for. Whether I'll give him the grace to say that it may be unintentional. But either way, this is dead wrong. I'm not going to read him cynically, but I'm going to read him soberly. First, let me be clear. When Peter says that he supports full equality for Israel's Palestinian citizens, an end to the occupation, and the right of Palestinians refugees to return, he's talking about what? BDS, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Let me be clear. The boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement is a movement that emerged out of Palestinian civil society, asking the world to stand in solidarity with them as they boycott Israeli institutions, not individuals, but institutions that are complicit with the oppression of Palestinian people. Palestinians asked the world to stand with them on this. They asked the people who say that they're for a free Palestine to stand in solidarity with them. That was the ask. That was the ask. I'm going to say that one more time. That was the ask. So when Peter says that he supports an end to the occupation, rights for Palestinians inside of Israel, and the right of return, he is saying, I support BDS. But you don't have to just take my interpretation for it, because look, he says, I support many forms of boycott, divestment, and sanction against Israel and Israeli institutions. I'm not exactly sure when you say many forms of it. There is a BDS movement. There is a formal ask from Palestinian civil society. There are debates about what BDS could look like, but many forms for me was a little confusing because there's a very clear ask here. And I worry that when you say many forms of boycott, divestment, and sanction, my question would be, well, do you support one that allows loopholes or gaps or exceptions? And if so, what would make those exceptions acceptable? And who would get to decide whether those exceptions are acceptable? That would be my concern. That would be my concern. So this is not fuzzy to me. You support the Leahy Law. You support Israel not participating in FIFA and Eurovision, ending the trade agreement with the EU. You support all of these things that are very, very clearly out of solidarity with the Palestinian people as they fight for self-determination, which is why they want full equality inside of Israel for those who are designated citizens. That's why they want to they want to move to the pre-67 borders, right? I.e., one, have a defined border for Israel, but two, to to leave Gaza. I'm not talking about just inside of Gaza. I'm talking about the practical bordering or occupation, whether you're in other words, moving all of your troops to the border, but still controlling Gaza by air, land, sea, electromagnetic sphere, population registry. There's an occupation. But ending the occupation of the West Bank, ending the occupation of East Jerusalem, all of these things, they must happen in order for there to be a free Palestine. And it can't just be for people who are living there now. It has to be for people based on international law who have been expelled, who have been made refugees, not just at home, because all Palestinians are refugees, but those who are throughout the world, they should have what they call right of return. Even if it's your mama or your grandmama who was expelled, you still get right of return based on international law. That's the ask. And there's only one way to get it. Resistance. And one of the forms of resistance that Palestinians have used, because Israel ain't just going to give it up, no colonizer does, is what? Nonviolent resistance. Karen D just asked me a question. I'm going to jump in with that answer. Marc Lamont Hill, if you were asked to go to Tel Aviv University to debate Israel's apartheid government and its oppression of Palestinians with Israeli historians, would you do it? No, no. Actually, let me rephrase that. Hell no, no. Because I've been asked by Palestinian people, we've all been asked by Palestinian people not to attend, not to support Israeli institutions, to boycott them the same way we boycotted apartheid South Africa. It's really that simple. Now, Peter makes some arguments here that I take seriously, even though I think they're wrong. But I want to take them seriously. I want to take anybody's argument seriously and engage them seriously. He said, I believe there is value in speaking to Israelis about Israel's crimes. I have spent much of my adult life speaking to Jews about Israel's treatment of Palestinians. In that effort, I've conducted public discussions with many people whose views I consider immoral and spoken at many institutions that are based on principles with which I profoundly agree. These include institutions like Tel Aviv University. Okay, first, yes, there is value in speaking to Israelis about Israel's crimes. That's not in dispute. That almost feels like a straw man. That's not in dispute. We absolutely 100% should speak to Israelis about Israel's crimes. I do it. Watch me on Al Jazeera, right here on the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel. You can look at interviews I've done with people all around the world on different platforms for the last for over a decade now. Not just in Al Jazeera, right? Engaging Israelis about Israel's crimes, engaging with Zionists who aren't in Israel about Israel's crimes, engaging with defenders of Israel about Israel's crimes. There's no one disputing that there's value in the dialogue, and there's no one disputing that there's value in speaking to people who have a political disagreement with you, even when you think their political position is unprincipled or immoral, as you said. All true. These include institutions like Tel Aviv University. Well, you're right. Tel Aviv University is complicit, and so therefore they would be an institution founded on principles with which you disagree. That part's true. But why do you have to speak to Israelis about Israel's crimes in Israeli institutions? Peter, you work at CUNY. We can have a debate at CUNY with somebody. You have the internet. We're on it right now. You can debate them on the internet. You ain't got to fly to Israel, fly into Ben Gurion Airport where you pay for the visa, supporting the government, flying on El Al airline or whoever, could be Delta, I don't know, but you can't fly into Tel Aviv. You can't hang around Israel without spending money. There's an event happening in Israel. Somebody's making money off that event. Tel Aviv University is doing it for a reason that advances their interests. Tel Aviv University is not having an event to undermine its interests, it's having an event to advance its interests, even if you win the debate, which I think you would. So why would you do an event that advances the interests of Tel Aviv University? I can't for the life of me understand the value in this when Palestinians are explicitly saying boycott Israeli institutions. It's that simple. He said, I do so because I want to reach Jews who disagree with me. Again, cool. No one's asking you not to. Because I believe that by trying to convince Jews to rethink their support for Israel's oppression of Palestinians, I can contribute in some very small way to the struggle for freedom. We agree. Reaching Jews is important. Convincing Jews to rethink their support for Israeli oppression is important to the extent that they feel that way. We agree. None of that is in dispute. I got to keep saying that. None of that is in dispute. What's in dispute, and again, it feels a little bit like a straw man, is the idea that to do that, you have to go to Tel Aviv University and walk across a picket line, that you have to ignore the BDS call. There's a certain level of hubris, I think, that comes with saying, yes, Palestinians, I support you and I agree with you and I'm fighting for you. And yes, you're asking me to fight with you by not doing this thing, but I'm going to do that thing that you're telling me not to do because I'm going to get you free. I'm going to get you justice. I'm going to play a small part in getting you freedom and justice. So I'm going to do this thing that you're individually and collectively asking me not to do. But trust me, I got you. No. I want to show you a couple of responses that came on this from some people, particularly Palestinian voices. Get myself all worked up here. Let's see. Ali Abu Naima said, it's not too late for you to heed Palestinians' call to boycott these genocidal institutions. Again, very clear. Noor Adikat said, why not speak to this audience outside of an institution that you describe as complicit? You realize your logic is a green light for others to sidestep the BDS call based on their own judgment. Exactly, their own judgment. You should both achieve your goal and be in ethical solidarity with Palestinians. Nadine Kiswani said, there's a scourge of Zionism and normalization in so-called anti-Zionist self-congratulatory Jewish spaces, which also happen to write books, cash in honorariums, and travel the world while talking about being morally superior for recognizing the bare minimum. I mean, that's a harsher critique, but she ain't wrong. She ain't wrong. Now, I want to be very clear. According to Peter, he did not make $1 off of this. He did not accept an honorarium. He was not paid to be there. This was really about having the dialogue. I do think that's important because I've heard the narrative that Peter was making money off of this. I don't believe that that's true. I find Peter to be principled and caring and sincere. It doesn't mean, though, that there isn't an industry attached to the work that we've done, myself included. I travel and make money off of books dealing with different social issues, including the question of Israel-Palestine. And so we have to be honest about that, about what that means, right? And how we might be framed as being morally superior. I mean, I'm owning that for myself, not just, I'm not throwing that at Peter. I'm saying that for myself as well. But this is a conversation that we have to have and a conversation we have to be honest about. I think Nadine is absolutely correct. So, so there were there any others here? There were a couple others that I thought were interesting. One was from Heba Goayed said this argument doesn't hold. Israelis are on the same internet we're all on. The idea that you can only address them within an institution that intellectually and materially equips a genocide is absurd. This is an awful error in judgment, and I'm really disappointed. Well, you see, I hit the heart button there. I agree with Heba Goayed, Professor Cuny, another colleague of ours. Fatima Bhutto said this is so disappointing and so beyond the pale. Sarah Schulman said, as someone who turned down an invitation to Tel Aviv University in 2009, I realized Realize then what you need to take in now. Your violation of BDS is more impactful than anything you say in person to that audience, all of which they have many other ways to hear. And so this is Tamara Nasser. I'm going to read a few more of these. I want to particularly play Palestinian voices, although Heba was Egyptian and Fatima Bhutto, obviously, if you know the Bhutto family, you know she ain't Palestinian. But I want to read a few of these. It's profoundly narcissistic to think that 3 years into a Holocaust, your lecture is so important and life-changing for a society of psychopaths that you will cross a picket line just to give it. So now, of course, there were some Zionists who were also criticizing him too. So he was getting it from all sides. I just don't care about what the Zionists have to say about I don't care what they have to say on this particular issue because it's not relative. Leila Khalili said, shame on you. Now is the time for BDS as Palestine moves off the front pages while genocide is still on simmer. That's a really important point as well. So there was one more I wanted to read that I'm going to read from Mohammed al-Kurd, and then I'm going to segue into the next beat of this because I do think it's important to finish this story because the story doesn't end here. I think hopefully Mohammed hasn't written a ton of things since then. Oh, yes. So he said, what arrogant, insidious war profiteering. You do not get to cross movement picket lines, undermine anti-occupation struggle, and override a political consensus created through decades of collective debate to line your own pockets. I know you will apologize for this in a few years after you benefit from it, because that is what you have always done, whether it is the Iraq War or BDS. You grift now and apologize later. Mohammed al-Kurd, another friend of mine, that's a very, again, a powerful, provocative statement. I agree with 75% of what he just said here. I agree with his critique, right, about that you don't get to cross movement picket lines and undermine anti-occupation struggle. You don't get to override a political consensus. I agree with all of that. Again, I don't believe Peter did it for the money because Peter didn't get paid. I just want to add that. I do think that, again, I have to advocate with facts. And I have to speak with facts. Yeah. But I thought it was important as we moved to highlight that voice again, prominent Palestinian voices as this is happening. Let me now move to phase 2, which I was equally fascinated by. I got to tell you, equally fascinated by. I got to tell you. Whew. And I'm reading your comments as they come in. And Bullet, I saw your comment. I'm going to get to that as well. Let me move to Peter's 2 days later. Because I was fascinated by this. And I didn't get a chance to talk to Peter because so much life was happening. And he was in Israel. And so there's the time difference and 8-hour time difference. I just couldn't get to him. Let me be honest. I didn't try either, but those are the reasons why I didn't try. There's another beat here. Let's move here. Because someone said this in the midst of the criticism. You know how in his bullshit tweet posted hours before his Tel Aviv lecture, Peter Beinart wrote, I believe there's value in speaking to Israelis about Israel's crimes. Well, apparently he was explicitly told by the organizers not to speak about issues outside the intended subject of the lecture, Trump and the future of American democracy. According to the university, Beinart agreed to these terms. And Tel Aviv University, Beinart was invited to speak about Trump and the future of American democracy. About 2 hours before the lecture, Mr. Beinart published a post which raised concerns that he intended to speak on another topic. That's the one I just read to y'all, for which he was not invited. The event organizers made it clear to him that they expected him to speak about the topic for which he was invited and only about it. He promised he would do so. Now, in fairness, this was the action. It wasn't just Trump and American democracy. It was Trump, Israel, and the future of American democracy, which does create space for a different conversation than just Trump and American democracy. Either way, Peter says it's not true. Either way, Peter says that's not what happened. Peter says that's not what happened. And he said, I was clear I would discuss Israel. It's in the title, including Gaza and the intersection between supremacist politics in Israel and the US. I began the talk with Gaza by discussing the genocide and why I believe Palestinians in Gaza have the right to return. So just want to make that clear. But that's not the interesting part. I mean, the most interesting part. That's interesting, but it's not the most interesting part. The most interesting part is when Peter makes another post. I got to say, this whole ordeal has shocked me. Every part of it. Every single part of it. The next day, that was the 25th, right? And it could be a day and a half, something like that, given the time differences. I don't know. It's not the point. The point is, Peter posted this. Let me just double check. Yeah, the next day and a half. By speaking earlier this week at Tel Aviv University, I made a serious mistake. Wow. Again, now Muhammad al-Kurd said he was going to apologize later. He said grift now, apologize later. Again, I don't think Peter's a grifter. I don't feel comfortable calling him a grifter. I respect everybody's perspective on this. I understand why people could feel that way. I understand why someone could be hurt by what Peter said. I don't think he's a grifter. I think he's a decent person who just made a really terrible choice. But it was a terrible choice, and it was ultimately unprincipled, and he ultimately prioritized his values over the movements for whatever, or in his interest over the movements, regardless of why. And I'll read him generously and still say that. In the past, when formulating my views about Israel-Palestine, I have sought out Palestinian friends and interlocutors and listened carefully to their views. In this case, I did not. Okay, why though? Why? Two things. One, you had access to them. You could have called them just like you call them every other time. But also, they responded to your tweet. They responded to your post. They reached out. The fact that you announced it the day that you were doing it is somewhat telling. I'd be curious to know why. Did the flyer go out and people started to ask you about it, and so you felt the need to say something? Otherwise, you would have said nothing? Did you feel morally compelled to say something? And if so, why only on the day of? Sometimes we do things because we don't want, like we ask people questions, but we ask people who will give us the answer we want, or we don't ask questions of people who we know won't give us the answer we want. I don't know. It's a very strange thing. And again, I'm withholding judgment, but I'm not withholding my analysis. This is not okay. I really wanted to speak to Israelis. Okay. Again, Peter, no one's saying you shouldn't have. They're saying you shouldn't have supported an Israeli institution that was complicit in genocide and in apartheid. This isn't difficult. In the U.S., I've cultivated conversations with Jews with whom I strongly disagree, both to listen and in hopes of changing their minds. Over the horrifying last 2 years, I've hoped for more conversations with Israelis. Again, you ain't got to do it there to explain why I believe. My motivation for giving the talk wasn't financial. I didn't receive an honorarium. Fair enough. I believe him. I wanted to say certain things to an Israeli audience. You can. Israelis have YouTube. Israelis have Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. They have Facebook. They have Instagram. They have TikTok. Speaking at Tel Aviv University seemed to offer that chance. No, as Sarah Schulman said, the harm done by crossing the picket line is worse than anything you could have said to that 100, 200, or 1,000 people in the audience at Tel Aviv University. I don't know how many it was. I let my desire for that conversation override my solidarity with Palestinians, who, in the face of ethnic cleansing, apartheid, and genocide, have asked that the world boycott Israeli institutions that are complicit in their oppression. As Noda Etiquette and others have pointed out, there are ways for me to talk to Israelis without violating BDS guidelines and undermining a collective effort against oppression. Exactly. It's that simple. And it's always been that simple. It's always been that simple. It's embarrassing to admit such a serious mistake. I dearly wish I had not made this one, which has caused particular harm because international pressure is crucial to ensuring Palestinian freedom. This was a failure of judgment. It was. It's that simple. This was a gross failure of judgment. I don't get it. I don't get how it happened. I don't get why it happened. I'm confused. Yeah, I don't know what to say other than, did he sell out the Pro-Palestine? Sell out assumes that he like took money or a position of power in exchange for this move. And I don't think that's what he did. But he absolutely undermined the spirit of BDS. He undermined the direct principles of BDS. He undermined the he just disregarded the movement to say, I know better. It's indefensible. I don't get it. I just don't get it. It's so out of character for Peter. It's so far from who I know him to be that I'm confused. And I know he did an interview very recently that I'm going to watch to maybe get a sense of why he did it. Also, I hope to have a conversation with him about it. Ronaldo said no, he sold out. He ignored the will of the oppressed in the name of fighting their oppressor. Who did he sell out to, though, right? Like, I don't want to get into semantics if he sold out or not. That's not my point. He's 100% wrong. It was a bad choice. It was an unprincipled choice. It was a problematic choice. And full stop. I just don't get it. Anyway, y'all, I'm not gonna stay here long. There was Bullet raised a question that I want to address because she asked. Devil's advocate, did you host VP Harris at your bookstore? No, no, I did not. I regret not more aggressively correcting this misinformation, but no, we did not host a VP Harris at our bookstore. Who did host? I don't know who hosted it, to be honest, but it wasn't at our bookstore and we weren't the host. I can look and tell you really fast, but it was held at, I think, the Met in Philadelphia, which is not our venue. We didn't book a venue. We didn't invite her. We did not invite her. We did not. We didn't do anything to bring her to Philadelphia. What the promoter did was they mentioned the names of vendors who would be there as a means of bringing people out. And at one point, they did say, "Hey, Uncle Bobby's is like co-hosting this," and we went on our site and intentionally and directly and immediately said, "No, we are not the promoter of this event. We are not the invitee. We are not the host of the event." I would not invite Kamala Harris. Now, here's where y'all might disagree with me. And again, I'm open to having the conversation. I don't morally oppose. I don't feel ethically compromised or morally compromised by selling her book in the store or elsewhere. As a bookstore, and here's why. Well, I can tell you a few reasons why. And this should be its own live, so I'm willing to have it again because I don't want to give it short shrift. Every book in our bookstore doesn't represent our beliefs and our practices. Where I'm comfortable having the book of problematic people. I'm okay selling the book of people with views I disagree with. I would do that. But we have limited space in our bookstore, and so I make choices about who I want to promote, what I want to promote, and what I don't want to promote. So, for example, I serve a Black community. Um, they love the Obamas. One of our biggest supporters is the local Black church, Enon Tabernacle, with I think 5,000 members, 7,500 members. When the Obama book comes out, even including Michelle's book that came out last week, on fashion, I think it was, they come looking for it. Is Obama a war criminal? Yes. But I'm not going to not sell his biography. I'm just not. I don't think, one, for free speech reasons, but also it becomes a very slippery slope if you're trying to sell a bookstore and advance a bigger project. Again, I think there are hard lines we have to draw. For example, if the BDS movement or any other movement said, hey, we want you to not sell this particular book in solidarity with us, I would do it. That's not the case here. But there's absolutely no way to keep a bookstore open if you only sold books of people who were not problematic, whatever that means. And so, yes, I'm okay if the local church says, hey, we want, can you mail us 3,000 copies of, I'm making one up now, but if Hakeem Jeffries, who obviously is deeply problematic, if Hakeem Jeffries wrote a memoir, especially a book that's not about Palestine, and if let me think, I'm thinking this through in real time. So if Hakeem Jeffries were to write a memoir, would I sell it in the store? Probably not. But if the local church said, hey, we'd love 3,000 copies of it, can you mail us 3,000 copies of the book? And we'll write you a check. I don't even see the book, right? We just mail the book as a vendor and you give us some. Yeah, I'd be comfortable doing that. Because that's what keeps us open. That's what allows us to do pro-Palestine events. That's what allows us to do Free Mumia events. I'm okay with that. I'm okay being a vendor in those spaces. And that's the work that we've done sometimes. I think that's different than saying, hey, Uncle Bobby's welcomes Hakeem Jeffries, or Uncle Bobby's hosts Hakeem Jeffries. I couldn't do that. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. And I'm not knocking people who do necessarily. I'd have to think it through more and understand the context more. But I wouldn't. And so again, French Life, when you say, would you invite a feature? I'm saying no. I'm saying no. I would not. But again, I'm not, but I think it's a complex issue. And I think that we have to stand in solidarity with communities. And so when the ask is made, we have to honor it. An ask was not made. And so am I, knowing that Obama has sent Predator drones in Somalia, does that mean that, like, what does solidarity with Somalia look like if they're not asking for that? I'm just saying as an example. I don't know. Yeah, it's a complicated thing, particularly when the communities that we serve have a complex set of politics and a complex set of needs that we want to speak to, but we also want to speak to them literally. So all of this is part of the nuance. But no, the back to the original questions. I don't want you to feel like I didn't answer it. I think I answered it directly. The answer is no. But I didn't want to just say no. I could have said no with complete confidence and comfort, but I want to give you even more context so that you understand what another question is coming in. Brother Mark, may I respectfully challenge you on selling his book? I think you should sell his book, Marriage. Yeah, please do. Please do. Please do. And I'll let that be the last question. Because I want to make sure. Let me see. I'm waiting for Jazz LP to jump in. I'm gonna take this real fast. I'm gonna have to roll. Is she typing fast? Okay, I want to do it. Anyway, in the meantime, before I take that question, click that link over there. You see that QR code up there, or go to patreon.com/Marc Lamont Hill official and sign up for the Patreon, y'all. The work we do here, the grassroots work we do, the independent media work that we do, the independent work we do, radical, whatever you want to call it, the work we do is completely self-funded. And so the only way that we are able to keep this going, the only way that I'm able to pay staff, the only way that I'm able to get studio space, the only way that I'm able to get stories written, the only way that I'm able to do the work that I do is through your support. So please, and obviously right here on YouTube, hit like, hit subscribe. If you're on Twitter watching this, it's always better to come over it's always better to come over on YouTube than stay on Twitter. There's that. But the best way you can support me right now, and the best way you can support this work right now, is to click that QR code or to go to patreon.com, which you see right here at the bottom of the screen, is to go right there and support at the supporter level or above. Your financial support is incredibly helpful. I wasn't rolling my eyes at you, Jazz. I promise I wasn't. All right, here we go. The question was, R. Kelly wrote #1 hit, I Believe I Can Fly. Do you still support him and do you still play his music? No, I don't. I don't play R. Kelly music. I remember one time in 2018, R. Kelly song came on in my bookstore. And I had in addition to stopping it immediately, I had to have a meeting with the staff. Like, we don't do that. And the rest of the staff knew that. It was just one person who didn't seem to know that. They didn't fit well in the store anyway. The fact that they thought they could get that off anyway. But no, I don't support R. Kelly's music. I don't buy R. Kelly music. I don't play R. Kelly music. And I'll be clear, I loved R. Kelly's music before I knew the information that the public came to know. But no, I haven't heard an R. Kelly song on purpose in a long time. Now, every once in a while, I'll be walking down the street and I hear it, booming in somebody's Jeeps or booming in the Jeep. How old am I? Or, you be someplace that you can't get out of and you hear it. And if I'm at a party or an event, I tell the DJ to turn it off. I literally ask the DJ to turn it off. So that's me. But it's complex. Again, there are gray areas here. R. Kelly, particularly at the time before he was locked up, had women in a compound in Chicago. So every time we were buying that music, it was literally funding someone's oppression. I mean, like, directly. But it's complex. Do we not play anyone's music who's done something bad? What's the line? I don't know the answer. I'm happy to work through it and think through it with you all in community. But I do know for me, R. Kelly is, whatever the line is, R. Kelly's on the other side of it. And so I don't buy or support R. Kelly. And I don't desire to, because of what I know about him. But that's just me. Again, I'm not saying that my approach to it is the absolute right and only way. Bullet said, I will still let the Michael Jackson slide, though. That's a great point. So do I. Part of it with Michael Jackson is that I don't feel like it's as conclusive. I mean, R. Kelly, there's no dispute over what happened with Michael Jackson. He was found not guilty. He wasn't criminally held liable. It's more complex. And maybe I'm just letting myself off the hook because I love Michael Jackson too much. I don't know. But I can tell you, I do not absolutely 1000% don't listen to R. Kelly. But I do listen to Michael Jackson. And again, for some, that's a contradiction. I don't know. I listen to Miles Davis, and he was abusive to, some of his partners, right? Like, I'm not saying I got this perfect, but I will say some of the shit isn't complicated. And to me, he's one of the ones that's not complicated. Yeah. Anyway, family, thank you for watching this tonight, this afternoon. I appreciate y'all. Love y'all. Yeah, that's it. Love y'all. Hit that QR code. Visit me on Patreon. I'll talk to y'all soon. Peace.